as I'm waiting for some albums to arrive that I will use for the next episode in the series on the best albums ever or the most influential albums ever, as well as currently preparing for the Sgt. Pepper's episode of the Beatles album series. I have a very quick one for you today. Today we're going to unseal a vinyl record from the 1980s or the early 1980s. This is the oldest vinyl record that I bought that I get to unseal live. The oldest item that I've unsealed on this channel was a cassette of the Blue Album from the 1970s, I think, if I recall correctly. This one is the oldest vinyl record. It's from 1981. This is a Beatles related record, more accurately a George Harrison record. To see which one it is, stick around. Okay, so the record that I'm talking about, and because I said George Harrison and I said 1981, maybe some of you figured out already, is not one of his best albums, or at least not one of his most appreciated albums. On the contrary, I think if fans were ranking their favorite, George Harrison albums, this one would be among the last ones on the list. It's not a bad album per se, it's just not super memorable, and more importantly, it actually had a few tracks that he recorded or wanted to put on this album that were rejected. Apparently weren't poppy enough. He was also going through a phase, and I think this kind of pushed him more towards the idea that the music industry is not what it's supposed to be. And so, yeah, this is somewhere in England, released in 1981 in June. The reason that this album has some level of importance, and the reason that it stayed or it had some memorability, if I can say so, factor, is the inclusion of this track all those years ago, which is a track that has some lyrics that are sort of a tribute from George Harrison to his former bandmate John Lennon, who had died a few months prior. Or actually, I guess if we're looking at when this was released, which is June 1981, John Lennon died in December of 1980. So, yeah, this was kind of his sort of tribute song to John Lennon. That's why this album has some historical significance for the Beatles' history, I guess. We will talk about this album more, as I'll have a video on the channel on some of the post-Beatles albums of the Beatles, specifically for George Harrison and Paul McCartney and John Lennon. We'll have a video on that later on the channel, and also explain my choices, because I didn't collect all of their albums from the post-Beatles era. I have some compilations on CD, some compilations on vinyl, and some albums on CD and some albums on vinyl, and they all depend on my personal preferences of some of their songs. This one I got because of those years ago, but also because I found a copy that was said to be mint and sealed on Discogs. It was quite cheap. I got it from a seller in Italy, but it's a US pressing of the album. But when this arrived, unfortunately, the cover is not quite mint. It is sealed, and it is from the 1980s, but it's not quite mint. I'm not sure which parts of it are not mint because the seller packed it improperly, and which ones were like that when he packed it. For instance, if you can look at this, the corners, at least 2 of the 4 corners are heavily bent, and you can see this one is quite visible. Same goes for this one. You can actually see very well how bent it is. It's more visible on this side. Pretty bad. But also, on this corner, it has a cut in the sleeve, which I think extends to the sleeve inside. You can see, pretty bad cut. But we'll see how the disc was affected inside. So I'll unseal it, we'll look at it, and I will also test it to see how it sounds. Maybe the disc was not affected, and this won't bother me that much. Sorry. Also, as I showed earlier, it has this hype sticker saying that it contains the hit song All Those Years Ago, which is the song through which George Harrison paid tribute to John Lennon. The track listing on the back, with the engineering and produced by credits, as well as the photography credits, some details about Dark Horse Records, and made in USA 1981, as you can see. Warner Brothers logo, sorry. And we have this very small, I'm not sure how much of it you will be able to see. I mean, to be honest, I can't see exactly what's written there. I'll try to figure that out later. Okay, so let's try to unseal this. Actually, at this stage, since I mean the plastic sleeve already kind of starts to pull out, but I'll try to kind of keep it on because of the hype sticker. I don't like to use cutters anymore, but this one is quite smooth, thankfully. So let's see what we've got inside. Okay, so this is the paper sleeve, the inner paper sleeve with the lyrics. It's not a very thick one, which actually might be a service to the album. It looks decent. I mean, it has the bends that the corners of the outer sleeve had, but it looks decent enough. The only problems are, and this was sort of, I guess, expected, you have some seam splits here, and obviously this part here, which is cut out. There you go, Beatles by Zion, Summer and Ying, but cut through that. And now let's just take a look at the record as well, and God help us. So, I mean, it's a little bit dirty, but it looks good. Oh, the Dark Horse label. This is the second side too. Yeah. Okay, so I brought in a better light so you can actually see better. The record looks quite good. No noticeable paper scuffs or scratches. No like residue stuck. There's some dust and lint on it, but this should be easily cleanable. So yeah, the record looks good. We're gonna have to clean it up just a little bit and then test it on the turntable to see how it actually sounds. Okay, so now let's just see how it sounds. Cleaned it up a little bit. Looks quite good. Looks clean and ready to be played. I'll see how YouTube allows me to play portions of this, so I won't play full songs or anything. I'll probably cut through it, but I want us just to see how much surface noise we have, and potentially if there's any distortion or any kind of problem with the pressing itself. That's basically the target of this, is not to assess the quality of the music. Okay. So as you can hear, it sounds pretty good. Little to no surface noise, especially during tracks you can hear only the music. Between tracks and at the beginning of the record there was a little bit of surface noise, but very noticeable. I think a wet spin clean of this will yield even better results. The disc looks fine. Like I said, no scuffs, no scratches, no inner groove distortion. It looks flat. So I think this is a decent purchase if it were not for the cover being in the state that it was, but pretty good. And yeah, I mean, if you're hearing this, then it means that I haven't received a copyright strike from YouTube. So yeah, that's the state of the record. So this was it for today. George Harrison, Somewhere in England, US pressing from 1981, sealed, the oldest record that I got to unseal myself and on this channel as well. Almost 44 years old. Pretty good record. The record was in a good state, looking excellent. The cover not so much. Not sure if this is going to make my favorite albums lists, at least of George Harrison or the Beatles, anytime soon, but it's a pretty decent purchase. Otherwise, stay tuned for the upcoming Sgt. Pepper's video, as well as the second video in the series of the best albums ever, or the most influential albums ever, according to me. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope I'll see you next time.
you.